Hey everybody, this green monstrosity you're looking at is my brackish tank. I'm actually getting ready to do some work on it. The main work I'm going to do today is I'm actually going to just drain a lot of the water out of it so it's light enough for me to move. And I'm going to move it over here to this empty spot where that quarantine tank used to be. So I got a spot for my 20 brackish tank sitting right there. So I am going to actually put my 40 breeder up here that I used to use for my native tank, and I'm going to actually make that into a brackish tank. And once it's ready to go and cycled in, I'm going to go ahead and move my inhabitants of this brackish tank into the new 40. So everybody will have a lot more space, and I won't have to worry about trying to get this tank cleaned up, because that is all cyanobacteria, that is not algae. And at this point, this tank is so filled with it, it's going to be easier for me to just start a new tank and strip this one down and clean it out. And then I'll have myself a nice 20 long to do something else with if I so choose. In the meantime, I've had people ask me before about my RO system and what I use my RO water for. And one of the things I use my RO water for is mixing up my brackish water. So let's go have a look at how I do that, and I will explain why I use the RO water rather than just using my tap water to mix up my brackish water. And certainly if you have a marine tank, you always want to use RO, and if you can, use RO DI, which makes it much more pure than the simple RO unit that I have. So let's go have a look at how I do it. Nothing complicated, but I'm going to show it to you anyways. And here we are in my bathroom down in the basement. This is where I run all my drain water. My wastewater from my tanks goes in here, etc., and I keep my spare buckets and everything else in here. I also keep my bucket of marine salts. I used to keep that reservoir full of marine water when I had a marine tank, and now it just sits there empty. I guess I should probably convert that over into a brackish reservoir. But for now, I just use this 5-gallon bucket as a brackish reservoir, and all I do is I take a regular measuring cup, I take a 1/2 cup scoop. I just do a nice well-rounded scoop. It doesn't have to be anything terribly specific. I just do something like that. And then I'm going to try to do this with my foot. I'm usually doing this with 2 hands instead of 1. Just dump it in, that's it. So I will get back to this in a minute and I will put that away. Next step is taking the bucket over to where my RO reservoir is and filling it up with RO water. Alright, and here we are at my reservoir. Now I just basically keep the hose hooked up above it, so if I ever fail to close the valve properly or whatever, the nozzle is just above the water level. That's the only reason I keep it hooked up there. This blue line is my feed line that comes in from the RO unit itself. I do have a valve on there where I can open and close it. I don't have an automatic shut-off. And yes, I have overflowed this. That's why I don't keep it anywhere near full. You can see where the water line is now. But I only use this for top-off, and I only use it for mixing up my brackish water. So it's just as simple as filling up the bucket and giving it, a good stir until all those salts are fully dissolved. I always try to wait a little while after mixing up a batch. I don't put it immediately in the tank. I like to give it 24 hours, but today I'm going to be doing a lot of work on that tank, so I'm going to need at least 1 or 2 of these buckets to refill it when I'm done moving it. So instead of sitting here watching this bucket fill, let's go look at another tank, and I will talk about why we use this water to make this brackish water and marine water. Alright everybody, I don't see any point in staring at my filthy green brackish tank just because we happen to be talking about brackish water at the moment. So we can look at my 125, and I will discuss why we use RO water to make up our brackish water and our marine water. When you think about brackish water or you think about marine water, that's water that has to be made to a certain recipe. There's a certain amount of dissolved calcium in the water. There's a certain amount of dissolved potassium in the water. There's lots and lots of dissolved minerals and mineral salts in brackish and marine water. It is not just the aquarium salt that goes in there. That's simply sodium chloride and nothing more. Marine salts is what you use to mix up your brackish water, and of course you use that to mix up your marine water. So if you're mixing that up to a certain recipe, you want to know what the end result is going to be, so you need to know what your starting point is. you can't use water that's coming out of your tap because that's already got some calcium in it. It's got some magnesium in it. It's got some potassium in it. And most people don't know how much that is. And of course, even if you did, you can't adjust your mixture for your sea salts. So ideally, you want to start with water that has nothing in it to begin with. I've likened it before to baking a cake. A cake has a certain recipe. You have a certain amount of flour, a certain amount of salt, a certain amount of baking soda. If you were going to mix all of your dry ingredients together, would you mix them together in a bowl that already had some unknown quantity of salt in the bottom of it, or unknown quantity of flour and baking soda? Of course not. You'd start with a clean, empty bowl so that when you put 2 cups of flour in it, you knew you had 2 cups of flour, and it wasn't 2 cups plus whatever may or may not have been in there in the first place. You're not putting some, salt on top of what was already in the bowl when you're not sure how much that was. No, you start with a clean slate and then you build your recipe from the ground up. And it's no different with the water. Now, the little bit of difference between the brackish water and the marine water is that marine fish are stenohaline animals in the same way that these freshwater fish are. And stenohaline means that they have a very narrow band of salinity that they can survive in. So when you're mixing up your marine water, it's really important to get it right because the fish have a very, very narrow range of what is acceptable for them. That's why you always want to use a good high-quality marine salt mixture when you're making up your marine water. So it's a nice, even, and stable mixture every time you do it. Just by nature of the animals that go in a brackish tank, they are called euryhaline, and that means they can withstand a wide range of salinities and dissolved solids in their water. Their bodies are capable of making rapid adjustments to their changing salinities. So I'm not so worried about using RODI water for my brackish water. You would want to do that with marine water, though, because the DI stands for de-ionization, and that really removes any last few little trace ions that get through a standard RO system like what I have. Now, my water is softened to begin with, so it already has a higher concentration of sodium ions. The sodium ions do pass through the RO membrane. So my RO water actually still has about 40 to 45 parts per million total dissolved solids, and a lot of those are sodium ions. I would not want to use that water to make up marine water if I had a very sensitive reef, if I had corals in a tank or something like that. You would definitely want to use RODI for that. For my brackish fish who can withstand, tolerate, shifts all the way from full marine all the way to full fresh and everything in between, it's not super critical. You saw how I measured the salt when I put it in there. I didn't use any kind of precise measurement. Just a well-rounded half cup in a 5-gallon bucket, I have learned, makes me exactly at 1.008 specific gravity, which is where I keep that tank. I guess so you don't forget, we are talking about my brackish tank. The water in this tank is at 1.008 or thereabouts. At this point, I can actually just dip a finger in it and taste it and tell you how salty it is and get it really, really close. So I don't really worry about if I'm not precise when I put my salt in the water. I'm not worried about a little bit of amount of dissolved solids that are already in the water. But that's why I use it. The other thing I use my RO water for is for top-off water. I have some open-top tanks that lose water fairly rapidly. And I'm going to get over here. When you are topping off of a tank, what is evaporating out of the tank is only water. It is pure H2O molecules that evaporate out of the tank. You're basically distilling what's in your tank. So any dissolved solids that are in your tank, whether it's nitrates or it's calcium, you got magnesium, if you got iron in your water, any of that stuff stays behind. And when you top your tank off, if you're using water out of your tap that has some more calcium in it, has some more potassium in it, you're adding to that's already in the tank. And then when the water evaporates and the level lowers a little bit, you add more, you're adding to that. So you're actually building up and concentrating these dissolved solids in your water when you're using tap water as top-off water. Now, if you do one little top-off each week and then every Saturday you do a great big water change, don't sweat it. Don't worry too much about it. if you have to top off a gallon of water every few days because you have a warm tank that's open top, you definitely want to use RO water. I don't recommend using distilled water for anything, even if you are going to use it for top off. I would recommend using RO water, or if you have to purchase water, you can buy the gallon jugs of drinking water. It'll be labeled as drinking water, and if you read the label, it will say more than likely that it is processed by reverse osmosis and then it has minerals added back for flavor. These are trace amounts of calcium and magnesium. That just makes it a little softer on the tongue, a little easier going down, because pure water is actually not very enjoyable to drink. It's actually toxic to humans and does not taste very good. So drinking water usually has a little bit of dissolved solids added back in to make it a little more palatable, and that's just fine. It's very, very small amounts, and if you want to use that as top-off water to make sure you're not concentrating dissolved solids in your tank, you'll be fine doing that. I prefer to use my RO system, and that is basically the two purposes of my RO system: to make my brackish water and to use as top-off water. So I hope that wasn't too rambly. I hope that cleared some stuff up for you, and I will be doing that video soon on my RO system and how it all works and what the membranes do and so on and so forth. So look forward to that. If you're not already subscribed, go ahead and do so. Thanks for watching this one, and I'll see you on the next one.